This is not a review. This is not a review of Joker, Folie, whatever it's called. I'm not here to talk about this movie in terms of entertainment. What I want to talk about, and what I think is missing from this conversation, is everybody just wants to talk about the fact that it's not what they wanted, that this is the sequel that nobody asked for. And that's the point. I feel like this is what nobody's getting. That is the point. This is not a review. This is not a review of Joker, Folie 2. This is my effort to kind of try to show... I want to show what's going on under the hood, and talk about this movie, not in terms of whether or not it's an entertaining movie or whether or not it's a satisfying conclusion to the first movie. All that stuff I don't care about. I really don't. I just want to talk about what this movie is doing and why it's kind of provoked this reaction. So Joker 2 is a movie that is all about kind of these different dichotomies. There's this dichotomy between sane, insane, victim. Is Arthur Fleck a victim, or is he a villain? Is he political? Is he personal? Is he being helped by the lawyer? Is he being helped by Harley Quinn? And finally, the ultimate question is whether or not he is going to choose to be Arthur Fleck or to be the Joker. He has these sort of two paths ahead of him, and the movie is all about kind of deciding which one he's going to actually go through. And a lot of people have pointed out that the movie sets him back. The first part of the movie is essentially just sort of resurrecting the Joker himself. We see Fleck, and he's in prison. He's psychologically broken. There's nothing going on with him. He's abused by the guards, but he's also kind of made friends with them. He's kind of recapitulated to accepting the domination of this system that was abusing him in the first movie. So the point of the movie is to revive the ghost of the Joker, just to completely banish him. The reason why the first movie was so politically incendiary is because the origin of Joker, the journey from Arthur Fleck, the journey from Arthur Fleck to the Joker, was supposed to be this condemnation of this society that he's surrounded by, and the society just spits on him, treats him like trash, clearly has no regard for him, and all of this is supposed to indicate that this society is itself totally morally bankrupt. Arthur Fleck is this victim that just cannot catch a break, and it's meant to be this condemnation of the society, and supposed to give this message that society creates its own monsters. And there's kind of this, behind that, there's sort of this meta moral message that a society that can be this calloused and this cruel actually deserves its monsters. That's kind of the heart of the matter. So you get Joker, and Joker is we're supposed to read him as a villain, but we also read him as a reaction to the kind of greater villainy of the society that he's embedded in. And that's kind of why the movie was significant. It was playing on this idea that you can have this bad guy who is somehow justified in his badness. On one hand, we don't officially condone what he's doing, but the subtext is that you're supposed to kind of subtly be yeah, but those guys kind of do deserve it, don't they? You're definitely not supposed to sympathize with the guys that he kills on the subway, and you're supposed to kind of see through the faux moral indignation that results from this killing. That's why when he kills, Murray, that's supposed to be an empowering moment. It's because he's kind of cutting through the moral posturing of this completely morally bankrupt society. Okay, so let's go back over kind of the history of the first Joker movie. Background, Joker comes out in 2019. This is right before COVID. And there's actually a lot of stuff about the original Joker film that is extremely left-wing coded. People kind of forget about all this, but Thomas Wayne is an obvious Donald Trump allegory. He's a bad guy. There's a focus on society's downtrodden. There's an emphasis on poverty, mental health. There's a huge amount of focus on corruption of the government and the people that run it, not serving the people that need it most. And there's rampant hate for the rich, for plutocrats. There's even strong eat the rich sloganing. All of this very obviously left-wing coded. I don't know who you have to be not to see this, except there are two big problems. The main character is white. And the problem with this is that it's depicting a white man in open revolt. And this essentially sent the entire media sphere into seizures of apoplectic rage. Practically every review from prestige outlets had to talk about what this movie revealed about whiteness. Just all of them, because it's depicting a specifically white man who's been let down by society, so he chooses to enter open rebellion against that society. And this is happening at a time when one of the most incendiary political developments of the past decade at this point is the left-wing coalitions choosing to turn their back on the white working class, which was historically their largest and most important client group. So they're not going to be receptive to any message that encourages the idea that a group has a justified right to dissolve the social contract when they are no longer served by that contract, even though this is fundamental to all democratic political theory. And this is why a film that's depicting what would normally be looked at as a people's revolution against a corrupt ruling aristocracy is relabeled as a fascistic fantasy. The other major problem is that Joker's rebellion is openly violent. So modern media media loves depictions of rebellion, but it generally wants to dress that rebellion up as something fundamentally non-violent, fundamentally symbolic. So we're thinking dancing, singing, getting a makeover, making some kind of big speech, whatever, but it rarely devolves to violence because violence is uniquely scary because it is uniquely hard to control. And so for these things to happen in 2019, and one other thing you need to remember about 2019 is that there is an insane amount of hysteria around white men, especially young white men. We got wine moms having moral panics about their white sons because the kid used the word triggered. It's just all over the place. It's all over the place, and so this steps directly on that frayed nerve ending. And afterwards, everybody who's involved in this film kind of realizes in hindsight that they made a right-wing movie, and nobody's happy about that. And after it's done, they all want to take it back. If you doubt this, just look at the fact that Robert De Niro is involved at all. Robert De Niro is incredibly outspoken about his politics. He's very left-wing, and the fact that he would be on this movie, the fact that he would play this part, you could not ask for a clearer demonstration that he did not understand the optics of what he was making. He's not a smart guy, and he didn't get it. And so now, after the optics have become clear in retrospect, a lot of people want to take it back. They want to say, oopsies, sorry, that's not what I meant. And they have to say this to the people that like the previous movie. So I think at this point, the word on the street is that the inspiration for this movie came from Joaquin Phoenix, and he said it came to him in a dream. This is not true. I'm sorry, I don't need to know people's hearts or anything like that to know that this is bullshit. Joaquin wants to rehabilitate his image. He's not happy about the fact that he's made such an obviously politically intense movie. And same thing with Todd Phillips. Both of them want to kind of repair their image to the Hollywood crowd. And to do that, maybe they have to make a flop, and they're okay with it. Money talks, but it's not the only thing that talks. So this movie is all about trying to reverse that critique. It's all about trying to take back that condemnation of society. And in this way, this is kind of the point of Harley. Harley is there as kind of a provocation to get him to be the Joker. The Joker is this persona that Arthur Fleck kind of puts on, and when he puts it on, it's one of the things that happens when he does this is he gives himself license to be violent, to use violence as a tool to defend himself and to empower himself against people that are taking advantage of him. And to that extent, his violence is political. Like, people have weird reactions to the word politics or political. Politics is just simply about the way things are. Like, it's so tedious to kind of it's so tedious to try to navigate people's kind of emotional reactions to this word. Politics is everything. When people say something isn't political, all that means, literally all that means, is that whatever that thing is, it exists inside of an area of agreement. As soon as that agreement disappears, whatever that thing was, it becomes political. So politics is simply about differing visions about what society should look like, what the greatest good is, what morality entails. All of that stuff eventually filters down through politics. Politics is the working out of those different disagreements. And so obviously you have this massive disagreement between what the society that Joker is responding to considers moral and what he sees in his reality. His life experience is it's meant to give us this kind of fly on the walls view of just the ways in which the pretensions of morality are actually false. And what was kind of nice about this was that it overlaps with Heath Ledger's Joker. It overlaps with his critique that people's morality is actually just kind of this myth that they tell themselves, and it's kind of meant to psychologically build up their sense of their own righteousness.
See, their morals, their code, it's a bad joke. Dropped at the first sign of trouble. They're only as good as the world allows them to be.
And his whole critique was that these people aren't, when he's talking about kind of the citizens of Gotham, they're not actually righteous. Their morality is kind of a lie, and his mission is to expose it. And he ends up failing in the end, but I think I always watched that movie and felt that his critique was more legitimate than the way that the film rebutted his critique. But that's neither here nor there. The point is that Joker's rebellion is essentially a political rebellion, and that's why he becomes this kind of figurehead for this quasi-terrorist, or is it just sort of a revolutionary group? It's not really clear, and kind of the way that you would name that would itself be sort of an act of political attentiveness. Whatever. Harley wants Joker to be political. That is essentially her interest in him. When she meets him in the mental ward, she's in a mental ward that he is able to spend some time in, and it's kind of weird how this happens. So he's in a higher security area of the prison, and he's able to sort of finagle his way by befriending one of the guards into getting put, or like being able to spend time in the kind of like lower security psych ward area. And in this way, he meets Harley Quinzel, whatever it is they call her this time around. I don't know why they keep having to mess with people's names. She misrepresents herself initially. She says that she's like from his same neighborhood. I can't remember. She says like the same building too. It's kind of weird. But like she makes herself out as having been kind of abused by her parents. That she's there because she burnt down their building. She kind of implies that she killed them. And she adores him for the fact that he did kill Murray and the three guys. And what this indicates is that she adores kind of the political radicalism of it. She adores his political persona, the Joker. And to the extent that that is like him, to the extent that that's who he's going to choose to be, she's interested in him. The problem is there's also this Arthur Fleck character. The main movement of the movie is related to whether or not Arthur is going to kind of embrace the mantle of the Joker or if he's going to reject it. What I found interesting about this is that in a lot of ways it's kind of an inversion of the Nolan Batman, the Christian Bale Batman, whose his whole thing was this desire to transcend being just a man. He wanted to become this symbol. And in the end, Batman kind of is who he truly is. He's not Bruce Wayne. Bruce Wayne is actually a facade that he puts on to kind of draw attention away from his true persona, which is the Batman. But in the end, Arthur Fleck, like he does the opposite thing. So like we have to talk more about what happens throughout the movie. This is very disorganized. Like I don't have a script. I just have some notes. Arthur's lawyer, her whole thing is that she is going to pursue the insanity defense by suggesting that Arthur has a dissociative identity disorder and that the Joker is this alternative identity that took over in order to protect Arthur. Like he has this trauma in his background, and the Joker takes over because he's endured all this trauma. And so Arthur Fleck, the person that's currently in prison, isn't actually guilty for this stuff. The problem for Arthur with this is that in order to make this defense work, he kind of has to accept this vision of himself as this helpless, pathetic, abused victim. And he's torn between wanting to allow that defense to happen so that he can like have a chance of avoiding the death penalty, but also this alternative option of choosing to identify himself with the Joker. And if he does that, he's powerful, he has access to violence, he uses violence to empower himself over the people that are abusing him. He's sexy. People talk a lot of shit about the musical aspects of it. They're mostly fine. The level of complaining about this is beyond any kind of rational disagreement or like artistic issue that you could have with it. It's supposed to represent his interiority, and especially the idea that his interiority is kind of bound up in this artificial theatrical character that he wants to embody. Is it perfect? No, but it's also not bad. Sorry, there's probably like 15 minutes of songs in this movie. You can deal with it. It's like if the 15 minutes from the song is what breaks you, I don't know what to say. And so ultimately, when he decides to fire his lawyer and represent himself, which he does this because he is rejecting this victimhood identity. He's rejecting his identity as Arthur Fleck, and he's choosing to identify with the persona of the Joker because it's just better in every way for him. And you think cool stuff is about to happen. It's very odd the way Todd Phillips does this. Joker never really has a moment of victory in the courtroom. You would think that after he fires his lawyer and puts on the suit, puts on the paint, that he's going to have some kind of like moment in the courtroom. But I think like the immediate next scene is when Gary Puddles, the midget guy from the first movie, is called up to the stand. And a lot of people who say they hate this movie cite this scene as like one of the better aspects of it. But this scene is kind of doing all of the thematic work that the movie is trying to do. So in that original scene, when Randall comes over, Randall's clearly trying to be scummy and try to like weasel his way out of some responsibility for having given Arthur the gun, and just at the same time pretending to be his friend. And Arthur kills him because Randall's a dickhead. That's just all there is to it. Randall's an asshole, and Randall is an asshole who kind of pretty directly led to the falling apart of Arthur Fleck's life, and that Arthur just doesn't have any moral responsibility towards him. That's kind of I'm going to keep saying this. That's the point of that movie. He's rejected the moral paradigm that everybody else is operating under because he just sees through it. He's living in a completely corrupt society, and he chooses to reject it. And part of that rejection is he kills Randall. And he shows mercy to Gary to indicate that he's not just like a monster. He's an extremist, clearly, but he's not a mad dog. He's not just going after everybody. The entire point of this courtroom scene is to like reframe his act of mercy, where he kind of is kind to Gary, lets him go, doesn't hurt him, tells him that you're the only person that was ever nice to me, gives him a kiss on the head, sends him on his way. That was supposed to sort of make Joker redeemable. Like, even if you kind of look at the comments that people would say on that scene, most of them would point out that, like, he has this moral compass. It's clearly very f***ed up, but he has it. He has a sense of morality, which prevents him from just killing or hurting anybody. The courtroom scene reframes that and tries to suggest that Arthur, rather than showing mercy to Gary, actually, like, really harmed him. And Gary kind of talks about how he felt so small, how he lost his job because he couldn't function. He was so psychologically scarred by that experience that everything, like, just fell apart for him, and he starts crying. And Arthur Fleck is, like, Arthur's clearly affected by it too. But the point of it is to sort of turn the tables on Arthur and turn the tables on Joker by suggesting, hey, you're no better than these people that harmed you. You're just as bad. You're just perpetuating the same kind of system of harm that you're complaining about. So your moral complaint actually doesn't hold water. You don't get to kind of, like, cast judgment on society because you are doing the same thing that you're accusing society of. The problem is it just doesn't work. The idea that he's responsible for the psychological fallout for Gary is just, it's weak. It is not at all compelling. I don't know. Like, I don't know if many people would find it compelling. But to me, it just falls totally flat. Like, this complaint is so absurd. Like, the idea of drawing a comparison between Gary's psychological fallout and the kind of, like, systematic torture that happens to Fleck throughout his movie that leads him to his break. I don't think these things are comparable at all. I think you'd have to be kind of insane to think that they were. But that's the point of the scene. The point of the scene is to sort of morally undermine Joker's rebellion. And then, what's odd is that following this scene, it's just over. The courtroom ends. Harvey Dent doesn't call any more witnesses. Joker just rests his case, and then he goes back to prison, and immediately, Gleason, pulls him aside. They take him to kind of a deserted part of the prison, and they him. They R-word him. I think I'm not supposed to say it. I think there's, like, rules about saying it, but you know what I'm talking about. Like, there's a reason why his jacket is tucked into his underwear when he comes back. There's a reason why they take his pants off. I think I'm making myself clear here. And then, after that, they drag him back to his cell, and they, so there's this one, like, kind of sweet kid. I guess it's implied that he's, like, mentally damaged or mentally disabled. Sweet kid who is a friend of Arthur's, and he sees them bringing Arthur back, and he starts castigating the guards. He's saying the Saints are, you better hope that you're not here when the Saints come back. The Saints are coming, and he's kind of, like, telling the guards that they're going to get theirs. And the head guard goes over to him and starts choking him and eventually kills him. He just kills him right there. And after that happens, there's sort of a replaying of the scene that initially played in the first movie after he had killed the guys on the subway, where he goes to the bathroom and there's that very long and uncomfortable and bizarre scene where he's dancing and the cello music is playing. There's a replay of that, but in this replay, he washes his face off. And so, like, symbolically, he's disowning the persona of the Joker. The following day, when he gives his speech, he's announcing that he's disowning the persona of the Joker, and it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't make sense that the R scene, the R thing, the murder of one of his friends by one of the guards, all of this stuff should actually strengthen his resolve. It should actually kind of, like, he had kind of been morally undermined by Gary's testimony, but if anything, this should kind of remove any doubt. Like, yeah, these guys are operating the levers of power for the kind of moral apparatus of this society, and they are totally corrupt, just unbelievably corrupt. They're raping and killing prisoners without repercussions. This is absolutely morally bankrupt. There's just nothing standing here, and it's bizarre that his reaction to that should be to become defeated by it. I think what Todd Phillips was going for here is the idea that his use of violence comes with moral complications seen by the kind of unintended harm that he does to Gary, and also it invites a kind of greater use of violence from the powers that be. So they are able to exercise unilateral violence on him. He can't really do anything about it, and not only can they violate and humiliate him, they can kill people that he cares about. And I think that the reason why he kind of disavows the Joker is because he's just defeated. Like, he doesn't have the kind of backbone to continue this. And that's sort of what the point of his speech the next day is. And so Harley Quinn's come to the prison. She's dolled up in kind of an outfit that is reminiscent of her sort of classical outfit. And she's got a certain number of people who are kind of political allies to the Joker. And they're they're in the courtroom and they're kind of waiting for him to give the word. Like there's a powder keg that's waiting to go off. And rather than set that powder keg off, he instead chooses to fully identify as Arthur Fleck, and he embraces this victim identity. And it's at this point that Harley leaves. She kind of realizes this guy can't go the distance. He's not capable of being sort of the leader that she wants him to be. Like she wants them to be Bonnie and Clyde. She wants a guy who's going to ride or die, go all the way, and he can't do that. He doesn't have it within him. And that's sort of the message of the movie, is that they have this guy who's kind of set up to become a political figurehead, and rather than do that, he chooses to abandon that possibility. And when he does this, like immediately after, there's this bomb that goes off, and he kind of, in the haze afterwards, walks outside, gets picked up by a couple of his like disciples. There's people that, kind of the people that have like taken on the mantle of the Joker, and a couple of them see him, they stuff him in a car, and they try to smuggle him out. And like kind of it's clear that the idea here is they want him to become their leader. They want him to kind of become openly political at the moment when he doesn't want to do that anymore. He wants to abandon any political dimension to his existence. He doesn't want to be the Joker. He doesn't want to be taking on society. He just wants to have his love affair with Harley Quinn, form a life with her. He essentially wants to live a normal existence and not a political one. This whole movie is about him sort of returning to the fold and giving up the radicalism that kind of defined who he is as Joker. And I guess what kind of like annoys me about the critiques of this movie is that artistically, there's literally nothing wrong with this story. This is a completely valid narrative that you can tell. You can tell a story about a guy who decides that he doesn't want to lead a political existence, that he wants to kind of turn back from the brink, and he wants to, even though it means disempowering himself, try to have a normal life. There's nothing wrong with this story. I defy any person to come up with some kind of pseudo-objective reason why this is not a valid story to tell. The reason why everybody hates it is because of the political implications. It's because it undermines what people liked about the original Joker. And people didn't like the Joker because of its cinematography or because of like well-crafted dialogue or anything like that. They liked it because of the political messaging. They liked it because it made people uncomfortable, and it was kind of a middle finger to what people saw as a morally bankrupt society in our own world. But of course, nobody wants to own that. Nobody wants to own that it was the political dimension of Joker that they actually liked, because this would kind of sort of get in the way of the I don't want politics in my art. I want politically neutral art. There's no such thing as politically neutral art. You either understand this or you don't. I don't have time to explain it right now. There's just no such thing. It doesn't exist. There's just art that you agree with politically and art that you don't agree with politically. So anyway, he escapes with these guys. As they're taking him away, he decides he just doesn't want any part of it. And at this point, they're in a car, and he gets out. He starts running, and they're running after him, but they don't get there. And as he's kind of breaking away from them, and they're kind of getting chased down by the cops, one of them is crying out behind him, "Hey, we still love you, Joker. Like, we'll do anything for you." He leaves, and he goes back to the staircase where he had his big iconic scene, and there he sees Harley Quinn, and he kind of goes up to her and tells her that he wants them to have a life together. And she just sort of rejects him. She sort of tells him that there's nothing, there's only the fantasy, and then she starts singing, that's entertainment. And I think this is kind of a weird choice by the writers. Throughout the movie, there's kind of this open question of whether or not Harley Quinn is LARPing or if she's the real deal. And if she's LARPing, I don't know. She's swinging. This is one hell of a LARP. She puts herself into an insane asylum. She's essentially alienating all the people around her. This is quite the LARP, if it's a LARP. It seems easier for me to believe that she is a legitimate radical. She wants Joker to actually get out and wage a war against society. And to the extent that he's willing to do that, she is going to be ride or die for him. But when they get out, she has kind of two things that she does. First of all, she says, she has this line about how all we had was the fantasy. And that's an odd thing for her to say. Like, there are two ways of reading what she's doing. Either she's lost interest in Arthur because what she cares about is the cause, and what she cares about is his capacity as a leader. And the other possibility is that she just cares about this fantasy where they're part of a cause and he's a leader. And to that extent, like, that's the LARPing thing. Like, if she's LARPing, that makes sense. It just doesn't make sense that she would go this far. She's gone so far. It's so ridiculous. But you're supposed to read it as she's always been fake. She when she starts singing entertainment, that's entertainment. It's implying that their love affair, all of the things that it was based on, is actually just this facade. It's actually a fantasy in the same way that a movie is a fantasy. It's not real. It doesn't connect with reality. The problem with this is that just her behavior up to this point doesn't really fit with that. Like she's been pretty crazy up to this point. And I don't know, the implication that she might just like kind of put this behind her and get a normal office job seems a little wild to me. It seems like it's not a fantasy. It seems like she's actually interested in getting crazy. So for her to do those two things, I don't think it's good writing. I think that is kind of one of the weaker moments in the movie. Even though like I don't agree with what they're trying to do with the movie. I think for the most part it's technically sound. I think that this is one exception to that. Anyway, she says it's not going to work. She tells him goodbye, and he says, He says, I'm still the guy that killed Murray and that you fell in love with. And she says, and I think rightly, no, you're not. Like, yes, it's true. You are kind of identical to that person. There's not another person that did that, but in some very real way, the person that killed Murray is gone. That was a possibility for you, but you've decided to turn your back on that possibility. And she's supposed to seem like very heartless for this, but I actually think she's pretty reasonable. Like if you were to look at this, if you were to instead of this scenario, imagine I'm gonna have a hard time with this. I don't know, say Mary Jane and Spider-Man. And Mary Jane falls in love with Spider-Man, and she's in love with Spider-Man because he's a hero. And then imagine if one day Peter Parker decides, oh, I'm the guy that you've been in love with, but I'm going to give up the Spider-Man thing. I'm just going to be a regular dude. I'm not going to do any more hero stuff. But I'm still the same guy. I think we would really understand if Mary Jane was like, nah, you're actually not the same guy. You're not doing the things that made me care about you. So you kind of don't get to sort of like take credit for those actions in perpetuity and sort of say, well, you still ought to love me because I did those things. If you're not continuing to do them, if I fell in love with kind of some aspect of your character and you're giving that character up, I don't really see any real reason why I should continue to love you. I feel like Harley Quinn has kind of a pretty good case here. This is just out of control. I can't believe I've talked for this long. He goes back to prison. She tells him goodbye. He goes back to prison, and he in the final scene, he gets killed by a guy who's sort of like implied is going to be the Joker. And there's kind of a nice little touch here. So one of the guards tells him that he's got a visitor, and I think it's implied that the guards have set this up. I think the guards have kind of are allowing this to happen. So he's going to go talk to the visitor, but while he's on his way, a guy comes in from behind. It's a kind of random kid that we've seen a few times, hadn't really done anything, and comes up to him. He's like, can I tell you a joke? Doesn't matter. It's not even worth repeating. It just ends with him saying, like, you get what you fucking deserve. And he shivs him to death. And then he starts laughing hysterically. And it's like, oh, okay, this guy's going to be the Joker. He's going to take on the Joker mantle. Like, we're back to comic book movie stuff. This kind of weird diversion into kind of more art film stuff, like more real cinema stuff. We're putting a stop to that. Holy shit, has it been weird. We're putting a stop to that. We're going back to just comic books. We like comic books. We're doing the Joker. Joker's what we're doing. Arthur Fleck, he's going to die right here. And as he's kind of going down, there's actually this scene that I kind of really like, where it flashes back to one of his fantasies where Harley had actually shot him in one of his fantasies, and it kind of flashes back to that. And he starts singing that he's going to have a son, and it's ambiguous whether or not the son that he's referring to is like the actual biological child that Harley Quinn is carrying, or is it this guy? Is the Joker his real son? And it's kind of indicating that the spirit of vengeance has been reborn into this more suitable vessel. And in that way, I kind of like it. It kind of works for me. I certainly, absolutely do not want there to be any connection between these movies and any other movie ever made. Like, it should just never happen. I like this as an ending. I like this kind of, like, people are super upset about this. I don't really understand why. I think people are confused by this movie. It's fine. The problem with it is simply that it is taking a political stand that puts it at odds with the people who had previously liked it. So if you read most of the mainstream coverage, it's going to be notably more positive. You're not going to see any headlines about like, oh, we're worried about mass shooters. You're not going to see any of that, because this movie is essentially safe. It is the director sort of shoring up some issues with his image that were created by him having done Joker, and he wants to kind of take it back, and that's what this movie is about. Now, if you like or dislike that, that's just a completely separate issue from the kind of quality as a piece of art for this movie. And I guess that's what's been annoying me. I guess that's why I sat down to make this. I'm sorry it's been such an unbelievably confusing mess. I'm gonna try to kind of like edit it up, make it a little bit more coherent. But I just wanted to say something about it. I feel like you get a very limited amount of time to make commentary about popular movies, and I don't know, just trying this out, just seeing how this works. Who knows? Who knows? Anyway, thanks for listening or watching. We'll see if this actually makes it up onto the channel. And yeah, have a good one. Take care of yourself. All that good stuff. I'm out. Bye bye.